Hello everyone, welcome to this special podcast of the Ben Lister podcast series 2, episode 2. Today's guest was James Hogarth. Hope you like it, hope you enjoy it. BL out, thank you. Hello everyone, welcome to another podcast. I am Ben Lister. Welcome back to the Ben Lister podcast, episode 15. In previous episodes we have had guests such as Peter Levy, Sean McAllister, Lucy Clark, Chris Heath, John Gilbert, Fiona Mills and many more, but today is a legend and a hero of man from Radio Humberside and former Hull Hospital radio presenter, I believe. And he is in the Zoom chat today. Please welcome, from Radio Humberside, the one, the only, James Hogarth. Hello James, welcome along this evening.
Hello Ben, yes, thank you very much for asking me to do this. It's a real pleasure to talk to you today after a long list of interesting people.
I have urged you this for a long time. You ready to rumble in the jungle?
Go on then, yeah. It's a bit different to be asked questions rather than be asking the questions, but yeah, you ask away and I hope I give an honest account.
Let's begin. Question 1. Where did you start your career as a broadcaster and what was your job role?
Well, my career started with, as you said, you were right to say, Hospital Radio in Hull. It was a station and is a station called Kingstown Radio. Things were very different. I started in 1996. I'd just done my GCSEs. I did reasonably well at them, but I'd always had in the back of my mind, well, certainly for a year or so before actually doing hospital radio, I had a real interest in the local media and real sort of keenness to see if that was a career for me. So after badgering them, back then you've got to bear in mind that there wasn't emails necessarily. Not everyone had an email account. So I'd written to them a couple of times, hadn't got any joy. So I rang one day and was told, oh yeah, we were due to write back to you. They didn't. So they said, come along tonight. You can meet the chairman and the secretary of hospital radio station, as I say, called Kingstown. It was then at a hospital called Princess Royal Hospital, which isn't there now. It's actually where the Endeavour School is these days. And that was where the studios were based. So I came along. It was a Monday night. And I met this gentleman called Randy Jones, great name, really lovely bloke. And he said, look, can't promise you anything, but why don't you come and come in and make the tea and sort of hang around a bit, see what we do, and we'll take you from there. And weirdly, the next day, the letter that they said they'd written to me, or hadn't written to me, was a letter saying, unfortunately, we can't offer you a place. But thankfully, they ignored that. So that was in 1996. And then in terms of how I got to BBC Radio Humberside, I think sort of 4 years, maybe 3 years after that, in 1999, I got really friendly with a guy called Richard Usher, who was then, he'd gone from Hospital Radio in Hull and was working full time at Radio Humberside. But Richard and me go way back. And Richard said, look, I know you're interested in BBC Radio Humberside. I can't offer you anything. I'm not a boss. But why don't you come in again, make the tea, make the coffee, just hang around and see if anyone notices you. And I've got to say, that was the point, from that point in, that I've had a BBC job. Initially as a volunteer, and then the October of 1999, I got some paid work. It sort of disappeared after that. And then about the year 2000, I've been working ever since. I was what we call casual for many years. So that means I didn't have a contract. All I had was a piece of paper that said, when you work for us, we'll pay you. So I wasn't really made staff until about 2006, 2007. So I was a freelancer for a long time. And I've been with Radio Humberside ever since.
Wow, that's the beginning story.
Yeah, it's the kind of traditional way, or it was then, the traditional way to get your foot into the industry was, if you didn't have a degree, or maybe you did have a degree, was to do some voluntary work, was to go and volunteer at a hospital radio station. It's kind of changed now, but back certainly then, I was kind of the one, maybe the last one or two sort of generations of that being a way into that role.
Wow, that was a perfect beginning and a perfect crescendo, a perfect start to your radio broadcast career.
It was indeed.
Question 2. What are the differences between producing and presenting?
That's a really good question. I think producing, you're often there at the start of the journey, whether that be a single item, whether that item is a subject, shall we say, whether that be one individual piece on a program, or whether that be a full program. So you almost, if you see that a program is a journey, then you're there sort of at the beginning. You're there at the bit when you're loading the car or you're deciding the route to take. I think the role of as a producer is about putting the program together, the building blocks of the program together. So that's working out the story, working out what you want to get out of the story. It's also about supporting the presenter, because we have so many great presenters at BBC Radio Humberside. The thing is, every single presenter is very, very different. And their approaches are different. Their styles are very different. So you as a producer have to learn that responsibility of almost being a guide to a presenter. Maybe you hold their hand, maybe you support them with the information they want. It's such a big role. I feel that I'm fortunate in many regards, because I've come from wanting to be a presenter and being a presenter. And I think that helps in terms of how you look after a program, how you guide a program, because you almost see it from the presenter's perspective. You almost can second guess how a presenter will do something. And I now produce the Andy Comfort Drive Time show, which has an hour of solid news at 5 o'clock. And doing that is very different from my previous job of producing Bernsey. And before that, I was weekend producer. And before that, I was Andy's producer. So I've kind of gone back full circle. And I think the key is that you can't go into it with one particular style or one particular way of doing things. You have to kind of adapt to the program you're on, the style of presenter, and also just to the way people consume the radio, because people consume the radio now in a very different way from perhaps how they did when I first started. And people listen in short spurts now. They listen for less time, but you've got to make sure that 15 minutes they listen is a good 15 minutes. It's possibly the best 15 minutes, because that's when you grab them. But as I say, people consume in a very different way now. So people don't necessarily hang around for a 3-4 hour radio program. So you've got to make sure that everything you do is always the best it can be.
Yeah. Give your best.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think the thing is, we've got so many people at BBC Radio Humberside who have all sorts of different life skills, all sorts of different life experiences. Everyone comes from a different kind of background, and that's brilliant. I think the fact we've got so many different types of people means that everybody brings something different to it.
Question 3. What's your greatest moment, achievement you've had in your life?
If you're asking me from a work perspective, I'm a huge Hull City fan, and when Hull City reached the FA Cup final 6 years ago, I was the on-field touchline reporter. I've done a lot of sport, and I've worked around the sports team for a long time, although not as much nowadays as I used to. And I got the opportunity of the game against Sheffield United, when Hull City played Sheffield United at Wembley, of being on that white line by the substitutes, by the managers. And I was allowed to go on the pitch at the end of the game and try and grab interviews and thing. And not just being on any pitch, but being on Wembley, being on that, the home of the national game, the place where you play the FA Cup final where we won at Wembley in 2008, where Dean Winter scored that goal. To be there and stand in the goal mouth where City had scored goal and look up at the City fans. They say about money can't buy opportunities, and that one for me was without doubt that very opportunity. Because that might never come around again. City, let's hope City one day get to the FA Cup final again. But if I ever do that again, it will never surpass the first time of doing it. And I think that will be my greatest opportunity, that greatest moment in my career. I think, aside from the sort of highlights, and that's always going to be a highlight, I think even now is the knowledge that you are doing a good job and you're doing the right thing, because we're living in such a weird kind of time at the moment, a scary time at the moment, none more so than right now. And I think a career highlight right now is the fact that you're just doing the right thing. You're there for people. You're there as an opportunity to reassure people, but to inform people and get that important message out, that safety message. But on top of that, to inform people. So you can't say that working around COVID is ever going to be a career opportunity or a career goal. But it is now the real test of what we do, and the test of you as a person. And if you make an impact on somebody's life in a positive way as a result of what's going on right now, that should also be as important as standing on the pitch at Wembley.
Yeah, you're an inspiration, really, because I listened to you when I was younger. Lots of other friends listened to you when they were younger, and they like your style and format when you used to present on an evening, and when you used to present, and you're a great advocate for the young inspiration.
I hope so. I think I was awarded a great opportunity because I don't have a degree. I've never gone to university, and I can't ever say that was down to the fact that I never had the opportunity, because I would have had the opportunity. I didn't do particularly well. I didn't do very well in my A levels. I did make a mess of them, and that was a large chunk down to the fact that I was, I think, more keen to go to hospital radio on a Wednesday than I was of doing A level homework, and it left me at the end of those 2 years in a bit of a hole, really, and a bit of a scary hole, because I didn't have a job to go to. I didn't have a university course to go to, and I ended up on the dole, and I had to sign on for a couple of years. And that's a scary place to be. And I was young, and you know, my parents weren't particularly happy about that situation. Always very supportive, and continue to remain some of the most supportive people around me. And the very least I can do, Ben, is to give something back. Is that great opportunity that's been afforded to me, is to give that opportunity back to more people, and not just young people. But I think it is a brilliant place to be, and a brilliant opportunity, if nothing else, because you meet great people. But equally, it's a great place to respect. And I think if I can give that back to someone, then I think I owe it to them that I do offer support to other people.
I always listen to I always used to come into the Open Centre, as you know, quite a bit, and observe the presenters from a distance before COVID. They used to analyse the presenter's style, like Burnsy's style, like a few other presenters' styles.
I think that's a great thing you do. I think my advice to anybody, and I've only learned this in recent years, is don't try and copy people. Don't try and emulate, or certainly don't try and copy someone and try and be them. I think it's very easy to pick, and not just someone locally, but maybe someone nationally, maybe a big. When I was growing up, everybody wanted to be Chris Evans. I wanted to be Chris Moyles. And that's great, because they're incredibly gifted, super talented, at the top of their game presenters and broadcasters. But you soon realise that you can never be Chris Moyles or Chris Evans, because there's already one of them. But I think what you can do, as you say, is to is to listen and analyse. Listen to the way. I think a lot of it is. Let's be honest. David Burns freely admits that he's not the most slickest of presenters, but what's he good at? He's great at asking a direct question. He's great at asking the thing that the woman, man, person on the street wants to know. He's not frightened of asking a tricky question of a politician, of a council person, of a scientist, whatever. He's cheeky with it too. And I think that's what I mean is when you analyse someone, is look at what they do, look at the way they do something, look at what they don't say, or it's how they say it, and that is more important, I think, than trying to copy your favourite presenter.
Yeah, I agree with that comment, James. Shall we move on to question 4? Because I know you've had a long day, and so have I.
No, that's all right. Yeah, what's the question?
Who inspired you to go on the broadcast path, and who were them people?
Do you know, that's a really, really difficult question, because I actually don't know. I don't know if there was one particular person, after saying all of that about Chris Moyles and people like that. I think in later life, I've learned to like people more now, and I think I listen to presenters more for now, because perhaps I'm a bit older. I've got some experience behind me. So right now, I tell you who one of my favourites is, and I can never be like him, is Ken Bruce on Radio 2. For the simple reason, I think and that's, sorry to Burnsy, because obviously they're on at the same time, but what Ken Bruce does really, really well is a really light touch, is a very simple, that thing he can make a whole hour or two out of a joke about what's in your garden shed, or a simple thing that's going on today. And in between every record, it's just one text, it's one joke, it's one reference. He's not reading out 100 texts and tweets and things like that. He just keeps it very, very simple. So right now, he is someone that I could never, ever emulate, because I'm 41 and from Hull. He's a nearly 70-year-old Scottish broadcaster who used to read the news on Radio 2 and has done so many incredible things. So I'm probably more inspired by people now than when I was your age and when I was trying to get into the industry.
Yeah, as you say, one of my inspirations was obviously Terry Wogan.
But Terry and I think Terry and Ken Bruce are very similar, very light, gentle styles, very much sound comfortable to the ear, to the listener, and I think they complemented each other. It was clear that you could tell, but when they worked together, that they were also good friends as well as good colleagues.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Yeah. I agree with that, because they got on very well, and they used to bounce off each other a bit like a partnership. Good friends, but also like a partnership, because they were
absolutely, without doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Question 5. Who did you listen to when you were young and starting out on the radio?
It was, I think the reason I was inspired to work at the BBC Radio Humberside was probably because of the presenters that were on then. There was a guy called Peter Adamson. He was the Burnsy of the day, very different in approaches, but he was and I'm so glad I got to work with these people a few years later. Peter used to host a phone in on a weekday called the Soapbox, and a soapbox being something that used to stand on and share your opinion. So he was always on when I was coming home from school at dinner time. My mum, we sometimes used to come home at dinner rather than stay for school dinners. So the radio was always on. A guy called Steve Masson, who until recently even still presented on Radio Humberside and from time to time still does. And an absolute local legend, somebody that's recognisable to a lot of people on the street, whose name was very familiar. He was a local legend to a greater extent. And I think they are the sorts of people that I looked up to, and more, people like Judy Murden, who until recently worked at Radio Humberside and has only just retired, and sort of fast forward to Andy Comfort and Carl and people like that, because they all had, I think the key is that they had a respect and have a respect, and that the audience really, really respect and trust them. And I think, that was who was on. I never really was a big listener to Viking or to BBC Radio 1 back in the day, and perhaps I would maybe have gone down a more neutral presenting path if I probably had listened to them. But those people that were on Radio Humberside growing up are the people that I did listen to, and perhaps I was forced to listen to. But I kind of do think it stood me in good stead.
Yeah, like I know, I have heard of Judy Murden, I have spoke to her from time to time, lovely lady. And I know Carl, I've met Carl Wheatley a couple of times. Actually, when I was first at the BBC Open Centre at the Day of the Floods back in 2007, I was shown around the newsroom area. And I went into the Look North studio, and at that time they used to have the sofa.
Yeah, that sofa's gone now.
Yeah, it's now just a desk where Mr. Levy sits. Yeah, because as interviewing Peter Levy, last year or so, he's taught me a lot of things over the years. He gave me a few tips because he's interviewed the greats like Parky, a few others as well, when he used to be young, because he used to work with Leeds with greats like Harry Gratian, who's recently retired. Harry Gratian, bit of a legend over there in Leeds. He was the Peter Levy of Leeds and West Yorkshire, and I think the Bernsey of the Derby area is a guy who used to work at Viking, Steve Jordan, I think his name was.
Yeah, he is. He's now a colleague, a BBC colleague on BBC Radio Derby. You're absolutely right. We often share interviews, so I often see his name on the same scripts that I get.
Yeah, he's a good bloke. Question 6. What are the pros and cons of working on community and local radio?
The pro is the fact you are speaking to the people you know. You are speaking to friends. You're speaking to your great aunt. You're talking to people that listen and live where you do. You're local. Your voice is being heard. The things that matter to them are the things that matter to you. And I think I never had the opportunity of being involved in community radio because it kind of wasn't around when I started. There were things called RSLs, restricted service licenses. They were short-term radio stations. I think they were about a month. There was never the opportunity to be on an FM radio station in the same way that Hull Kingston Radio goes about things now. So the pro is the fact that you are talking to a very micro audience, if you like, of people. It is the fact that you might be on a radio station and the chippy down the road listens to you, and you can talk about, really, you don't have to talk about what Man United are doing, what Kim Kardashian is doing. You can genuinely talk about the thing that people in the chippy, that people in that pub are talking about, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is as important as it is discussing what you think of the vaccine, what you think of testing, what you think of how Arsenal got on at the weekend. And I think, whereas radio stations like 5 Live, like Radio 4, the commercial speech stations, they can't do that because they're appealing to a wider target audience. You are unashamedly local, and that is a good thing to do.
I listen to Humberside quite a lot. Like, I listen to you, Bernsey, Andy, and lots of other presenters who, like, I used to listen to Carl Wheatley as well, because he was one of the first voices I heard on radio when I went for my visit around the Open Centre. Him and Gloria Johnson, I think her name was.
And she was, yeah, yeah. And all of these people, you know, they're talking to the people they grew up with. So BBC Radio Homicide can't be as hyper local as a Hull Kingston Radio can be. It's kind of the next step up, in that it's 1 minute it's hyper local, it can be local about East Hull or West Hull, but then it has to also be very reflective of Scunthorpe, Grimsby, Bridlington, Beverley, Driffield, all of these places. Whereas if you're on a community station, you don't have to worry about those places. Yes, they're important, but for you there, it's wherever you serve, and that's not such a bad thing.
Question 7. Nearly there, don't worry.
That's all right.
What? Tell me and the viewers and listeners a little bit of a role, what you do at the BBC. Your job role, sorry.
Yeah, well, as you asked me, it's a production role, so it's predominantly my job is to produce the Drive Time show. Now, the Drive Time show has a lot of different sort of gear shifts in it. So 1 minute it's kind of a bit magazine-y. There's lots of music involved. We do a thing called Make a Difference, which is very community focused. People right now who are helping, you're making a difference with this. You're talking to people, you're hearing voices, but we can talk about a community group that's raising money for people who need some help at the moment, or food parcels. And then we have a bit more news. We have a bit more news at 4 o'clock. So it starts to build up towards the 5 o'clock news programme. And the intense part of my job is to produce the news hours. So that is very much breaking news. It's very much the agenda of the day. So whatever the main story is, I've got to find somebody or a way of covering that.
And also, you have to improvise if the sometimes briefings go on. You have to improvise in case the
absolutely, yeah. I mean, by rights, when we get told by Downing Street when those briefings happen, we get told a time, but you kind of at the reliance of the Prime Minister and his team. If he walks out at 5, great, but often he's a few minutes late. I mean, a few days ago, we think he was waiting for the end of Joe Biden's president-elect, his speech. Clearly, the Prime Minister will wait for the President of America, the United States, to speak. So, yes, you're right. A lot of it is about guiding a presenter through some improvisation.
There was a rumours going around Twitter because England were playing the rugby at the time he was supposed to be announcing the current lockdown. I don't know if you saw it, but there was rumours he was watching England play rugby.
I don't know that. There was also suggestions that he came out so he could see Strictly, so who knows?
Yeah. Question 8. What would you say to your 10-year-old self now?
Be patient. I think that your question is probably asked, what would I say to my 16-year-old, 17-year-old self, really? But I think the one thing I've learned is patience. I think my advice is you when you start out on this career journey, you kind of want to take on the world. You think that you can. Somebody said to me once, you have to learn to walk before you can run, and that will be the biggest advice. I never thought at the time it would ever be the biggest advice, but sometimes you've just got to be patient. You've got to not expect everything to come at once, and also take a deep breath. Don't get too caught up if you're getting frustrated in yourself, or getting frustrated that things aren't going your way, or the things you want to do aren't happening, because often they happen for a reason. It's probably a good reason as well, and I think the key is to learn from those reasons.
Yeah, the key is to learn from your reasons and mistakes from the past. And
without doubt, yeah.
And
also learn that you'll never be the finished article, that you'll always want to learn and always want to progress, and you'll never quite be as good as you want to be. You can always do better, and I think there's nothing wrong with challenging yourself.
Yeah. Question 9. Two more left, don't worry. Who gave you the best advice in your radio career?
That's a very good one. I think a couple of people at Hospital Radio did. There was a guy called Darren, not Darren Leatham, who you probably or will do a podcast with at some point. There was a guy called Darren Dolby who became the head of music at Viking and those stations. He was the one that said about the walking and running thing. He used to be a sort of an adversary of mine. I used to think, well, why should I listen to this man? And I'm glad I did, because it was maybe 2 or 3 years after he'd said these things that I realised, yeah, you're right, I do need to think. And I've had some very good inspirations at BBC Radio Humberside. My assistant editor has been my boss throughout my career, a man called Derek McGill, who has worked at Radio Humberside for probably most of the existence of Radio Humberside. And he's just a very, very assured, supportive person who, you know, is a great news writer, he's a great listener, he's a great boss, he has a good ear for radio. And even when he says, look, do something like this, do something like that, they're the sorts of people that I listen to. But honestly, advice and support can come from anybody.
Yeah. Thank you very much for watching this special podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. More coming soon. Hopefully hear from you soon. Ben Lister out. Thank you. That's a wrap.